I will order all things for your good. Doctrine and Covenants 111 to 114. Approaching Zion, Come Follow Me series. Take it away.
We, before we get going, and we've purposely put things into the podcast tonight to try to bring some joy, some laughter, to bring a little levity to this week. Obviously, we want to send out our condolences and our literal prayers to those who have suffered so much this last week. Obviously, the passing of President Nelson, to his family. What a great life. I mean, honestly, what an institution that man was. Just amazing what he was able to do and accomplish, and frankly, how he was able to inspire you and I. You know, he was. I think as time goes by, we will only continue to deepen our appreciation for the way he's impacted our growth down the covenant path. And then obviously the tragic events that happened in Grand Blanc, Michigan. Just sincerest love and prayers to the members impacted out there, and also to the shooter's family. You know, I can't imagine being in that situation, kind of forced to be in the spotlight when you didn't ask for it, you didn't want it, and to have to live with that would be awful. As a side note, David Butler has put together GoSend. What is it? What's the website, Dylan? GoFunds.
Hang on, I got a visitor. Keep going.
Okay. Anyway, there's one of those giving websites. I can't think of the name right now. I'm too tired. But anyway, David Butler put together a charity. Give, Send, Go. That's what it is. Can't believe that it took me that long to think about it. But actually raising money for the shooter's family, for his wife and his child. And I actually thought that was a perfect response, a Christ-like, loving response that has garnered a lot of attention. And so I recommend any and all who feel so inspired, please go donate to that cause. I think it's a worthy cause and kind of the perfect response of charity, love, and forgiveness to the family of the shooter after everything that happened on Sunday. So our sincerest condolences and love going out to everybody impacted this week, and we'll try to get back to normal programming after all that, and try to bring some joy and levity a little bit to our Come Follow Me this week.
Nobody was probably listening to you because I got up and everyone got to see how big of a mess my studio was behind me. I normally position myself strategically to hide everything behind me.
Apparently you had a stowaway or something in your office there, huh? Your studio.
This is just my garage that I've turned into a studio. So this is where everything gets thrown from inside the house. So it's just a pile behind me. Okay. I didn't realize we were going to be doing this somber of an intro when I put the slides together, because I started with a meme. So my apologies.
No easy transition.
My apologies for the transition here.
But it fits so perfectly with the subject matter tonight. So you just got to go into it. You just got to do it.
Okay. Here's how we were going to start. I was going to say, we have acquired actual footage of Joseph Smith arriving in Salem, Massachusetts after the hidden treasure.
Here we go.
Can't find my checkbook. Hope you don't mind if I pay you in spiritual treasure. That's what happened.
Oh, Napoleon Dynamite. I had no idea how prophetic they were.
Okay, section 111. So, there came a visitor to Kirtland who was from Salem, Massachusetts. Mr. Burgess, I think his name was.
Yeah, that's right.
And he was mighty impressed. And he told the prophet Joseph Smith, I know this old house where there's some treasure hidden up. Well, you can go back there and fetch it, and you can use that to pay off all the church debts. And Joseph Smith was like, that sounds mighty nice. He could not resist, and he fell back into his old treasure hunting ways. Well, long story short, they get to Salem, Massachusetts. Someone else had bought the house, and then Mr. Burgess was like, well, maybe there wasn't treasure there after all. And then he just bailed on them and left them there, and they ended up renting rooms to stay in the house that was supposed to have the treasure, and it was just an utter flop.
Mr. Burgess, man, he sounds a little like that crazy uncle or great uncle that you have. The nice guy. You really like hanging out with him, but really can't trust a single thing he says. Unfortunately, not sure leadership of the church at that time understood that there may not be anything to what old Mr. Burgess had to say, but there was
crazy old Burgess. That's what they called him back in Salem. Comes to find out.
Oh man. Again, as we always say, nothing is wasted on the Lord when your heart is in the right place and you're in tune and in line with the Spirit.
So Joseph Smith,
physical treasure.
Joseph Smith prays about it, and he receives this: I, the Lord your God, am not displeased with your coming on this journey, notwithstanding your follies. So it turns out the Lord was like, I can work with this. I can work with this. I'm pretty sure there's some spiritual treasure here somewhere. We'll do our best. Turns out that was the case. That they went, there was no treasure. They turned it into a mission. They preached the gospel, and Salem, Massachusetts became a little hotbed for missionary work a little bit down the line. Mm-hmm. So, all's well that ends well. And, there's a bit of a deeper lesson in that is, for all of us, is that, we live in the generation of instant gratification, but that's not always how the Spirit works.
Yeah.
And the whole go and do sometimes requires going on journeys and having failures along the way for miracles to be produced.
Yeah, and I appreciate that the Lord doesn't, as we always talk about in the church, the Lord meets you where you are. He doesn't belittle the part of the path and the journey that we're on. He understands our human frailties, and he doesn't try to put us down because of that. I mean, the Lord probably knew they were going on this journey and they're doing it for all the wrong reasons, but he didn't put them down because of that. He told them, like, look, not all of this was wisdom with what you're doing. That being said,
I don't know if I'd go so far to say it was for all the wrong reasons. Because the church,
the reasons, but
the church was in debt, and Joseph Smith, they had a lead, and he was like, "I'll go check it out," and
his heart was in the right place. He was willing to do whatever necessary to try to relieve the burdens that the church was in. Right? I mean, and I think the Lord can appreciate that. But it is interesting because he does say in verse 5 that the Lord tells him, "Hey, don't worry. I will provide a way for you to pay the debts." Like, don't focus on that. And so what does the Lord do? Well, he does what he always does. He uses this as an opportunity for the building up and the spiritual welfare of Zion. And that's actually quite instructive. It's very instructful for us if we're living righteously, if we're doing what is right. There are going to be times of difficulty and of sorrow where we wish things were going better. We wish things were going easier. We're treasure hunting. Yes, we're going about trying to solve our temporal problems. And the Lord is he's going to use that and say, hey, we're going to solve a lot of spiritual problems in the meantime, but don't worry. We are going to survive, and we're going to get these temporal issues figured out, and it's going to be all right. And that's actually a message I think a lot of people need to hear today, because to your point, we want instant gratification. Like, we want no stress. We want to have everything figured out right now. And that's just not the plan. It's just not the plan. That's not the way the Lord operates. And if we focus on the spiritual well-being of Zion and whatever local unit we're a part of, and really, throw ourselves in the work of salvation, the temporal stuff is going to get resolved. And you look back years later and you say, man, that really sucks. But look at where I am now. Like, look how much better life is now, And so, I think there's actually a pretty good use case here, and an object lesson for us when we might be going through some things that we don't want to go through temporarily.
And you and I both can testify to the fact that when you're on the Lord's errand, and by saying that, I mean, when you have a consecrated heart and you're armed with priesthood power, Spirit of the Lord, when you go about doing good, just being anxiously engaged in a good cause, the Lord will take advantage of your doings, of your comings and goings, to put miracle opportunities in your path. And those miracle opportunities can be very much focused on an individual that you run into. Sometimes it could be something more impactful, more, showy, let's say. But quite often, it has to do with the individual. That when you're going from point A to point B, and you're aligned with the Spirit of the Lord, that path, like the Lord can use the fact that you're out and about on His errand, that you are His servant, to place those individuals who need a bit of His truth and His Spirit in their lives in your path. And that's a lesson I keep reminding myself of time over time, is that just the importance of being actively engaged in doing good. Because it's so easy to fall back, and into just taking it easy. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure that's really the right attitude to have.
Well, this is somewhat the inverse or somewhat opposite of what you see in the world today. And I'm not belittling this or putting this down at all. I know it has merit and value, but you almost wonder sometimes if we live in a society where we want to talk and express our feelings. And, we have so many counselors nowadays and psychologists and, anyone and everyone, every time there's a problem, it's like, I need to go to counseling about this. Right. And I'm not putting counseling down. There's definitely value and a purpose for it. But at a certain point, talking about our problems almost exacerbates them. It almost makes it worse, as opposed to, okay, I've talked about this enough. Like, I need to go out there now and live and do good, and if there's something I worry about youth today in particular, it's they don't always live. They're not always in reality going about doing good. That was the example of Christ. He was in society. He was out with the people. He was mixing and mingling. He was finding opportunities to teach and to preach and to show charity and love and kindness. And there's such a healing medicine in that. When you meet people in real life, when you get to know them, when you can do little things to serve them, it's such a relief, and it's such an uplifting experience that, there's a time and a place for everything. There's a season for all things, but don't spend too much time or excessive time counseling and speaking. Get out there and live and get to know other people and find out how you can serve and find out how you can help. And that will start to solve more problems than almost anything else, and that will bring the Spirit into your life quicker than almost anything else. And it really is such a healing agent that I think the world in general is in desperate need of, but even in the church, I think that we could probably do with more of that, of fellowshipping with one another face to face and really finding ways to get to know each other and to show love and charity for one another.
I also wanted to talk a bit about this idea of foreknowledge, or even a prophecy, you might say, because there's the obvious question of, oh, if he was a prophet, shouldn't he have known that this wasn't going to work out? It's like, well, that's not really a reasonable expectation of prophets or of prophecy, for that matter. We have this idea that prophecy is like predicting the future, like knowing what's going to happen, and that's because there have been prophecies that have done that. But the point I want to make is verse 11 here. Therefore, be ye as wise as serpents, yet without sin. Okay, so there's a responsibility on us individually to have a spirit of righteousness and spirit of wisdom, lived experience, wisdom. Spirit of revelation, discernment that produces wisdom first. But then what does the Lord say? And I will order all things for your good as fast as you're able to receive them. So this was the Lord's response to them getting to Massachusetts and then not having the financial relief they were looking for. And he said, calm down, be wise, things will work out. But I love the subtle use of the word order there. And this is the title of the Come Follow Me chapter. But I will order all things for your good. Now, order can have a couple different meanings, right? I will order all things for your good. You could interpret that as the Lord will command all things for their good, which I like. But I look at the word order, and when I read that, it jumped out at me like what I thought of was like order of the priesthood. The order of the priesthood is a system of patterns, a system of types, of symbols. So when I was pondering on this phrase here, I will order all things for your good, I really saw kind of this bigger prophetic dispensational picture of the order of the priesthood happening, right? The eternal round kind of happening over and over and over again on itself. And it kind of opened my mind up to the idea of prophets and of prophecy. Like, why are prophets able to prophesy? They understand the plan of salvation. They understand the eternal round. They understand that the Lord's purposes are consistent, that the Lord performs his work and his glory in a repeatable way over and over and over again. And if you can look back through past revelations, past prophecy, the scriptures, and you can see patterns and you can see how the Lord operates. And then you can look forward with an expectation that the Lord will continue operating in the same way as he had in the past. And that gives you a level of revelation and then discernment to be able to look ahead and know what is to come. Now, not in specifics necessarily. In some things maybe, but that doesn't mean you know specifically that, there's going to be hidden treasure in Massachusetts. What it means is you can look forward and know that if we keep working true and faithful to what we've been commanded to do, that the Lord will in fact provide a way for us to accomplish these things that we've been commanded to do. So Joseph Smith could prophesy, we will build this temple in Kirtland and be successful, and it will come to pass. Why? Because he can look to the past and saw that that's how the Lord works. These patterns, these things happen, and when the system is put into motion, right, when that stone starts rolling down the mountain, right, it's going to continue in its momentum. And I think that's an appropriate way of understanding prophets and the spirit of prophecy and how the Lord operates through his servants among men.
Yeah, it's almost like a combination of taking spiritual wisdom and discernment and mixing that with faith, faith and trust in the Lord. And then you put that, all of that into action. And then with the Lord's help, it ultimately comes to fruition, and part of that wisdom and discernment is exactly as you said. You're able to recognize the patterns. You understand the eternal round and the order of God, and you understand how he organizes things, and you can look at human nature and make judgments and assessments based on that, because you understand the natural man and you understand the covenant path and the path of discipleship, and so in a lot of ways, I mean, this is part of how we can each be prophets kind of in our own lives if we're close to the Spirit, if we study, if we are in tune and listen to what the Spirit is telling us. We start to recognize these eternal patterns, so to speak, and then we can use that to our advantage, put our faith into action, and really bring about the transformation that we seek in our lives and in our homes and in the community around us.
Yeah, when Moses said, I would that every man be a prophet, everyone be a prophet, when there's prophecy saying that, in the last days, all will prophesy, that we will have visions and dreams, like what that's saying is that we will understand the holy priesthood after the order of the Son of God, and we will align ourselves with that, and we will comprehend ourselves as we are. We will comprehend ourselves in the plan of salvation, and we will understand where we're going and what is ahead of us. And then we align ourselves with that, and we can live with confidence. And we won't know what's going to happen from day to day, but we will have confidence in where we are going. Section 112 moves us into some revelation to the apostles and in the first presidency, and there's some missionary work that is to happen, and the apostles are to be sent out to preach. And it starts off with some interesting doctrine about what I referred to as the broken heart and the contrite spirit, which I didn't exactly use that phrase in this section, but it's kind of this spirit of sacrifice. And it says, nevertheless, inasmuch as thou hast abased thyself, thou shalt be exalted. Therefore, all thy sins are forgiven thee. And then it has some verses where they are sent out to preach. And it says, by thy word, many high ones shall be brought low. And by thy word, many low ones shall be exalted. Now I say unto you, and when I say unto you, I say unto all the 12, arise, gird up your loins, take up your cross, follow me, and feed my sheep. And, I mean, this revelation is to the 12, but we see temple covenants all throughout this. So, those of us who have gone through the temple and made those covenants, I think we could very easily apply this to ourselves, even though we are not in the quorum of the 12 apostles. What's being taught here is that to the degree that we abase ourselves, we shall be exalted. That's the spirit of sacrifice. That's the spirit of the broken heart and the contrite spirit that I titled the slide with. And it's such an important thing to consider, to ponder, because it's the ultimate paradox, the principle that by performing self-sacrifice, you actually get ahead, or you become exalted. And this is the spirit, first and foremost, by which one should enter into the way, enter into the discipleship of Christ, is by transforming yourself, by applying this law of sacrifice, becoming, following after Christ in this way, in order to receive exaltation. The gospel's funny like that, in that it starts off as a very selfish endeavor. And that sounds kind of funny to say, but it's true. When someone comes to Christ, they come unto Christ very selfishly. They are looking for their own individual salvation. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying that's how it is. When we find Christ, when we come to Christ, we are looking for salvation. We're looking for healing. And we find that in Him. And so there's this principle of being low, of having being in a state of humility, of being humiliated in a sense, and then seeking selfishly for yourself, and then you come into Christ, and and then that's a transformative experience where you realize that you need Him, and then He actually delivers, and He lifts you up, and now you've been redeemed, and you've been healed, and that's transformative experience, right? We have examples in the scriptures of this happening very quickly. This can be a process that takes time, years. But this transformative experience, in this process, you shift from kind of being selfish and worrying about your own salvation to finding salvation and then wanting to bring that salvation to others, helping other people find this same exaltation. And those are the themes that came to me when I was reading this, is that we have these 12 apostles they found Christ. They've been called to the apostleship. They've made sacrifices, and they've been exalted. And now the Lord's calling them to go out and find those who are ready to do the same. And that those who are prideful, they are to be taught doctrine so that they can recognize their need for Christ. But those who are humble, to be called to come to Christ because they're ready. And that encompasses to me like the whole spirit of missionary work.
I actually really appreciate that you said that, because this is something that bothers me, and I don't mean for this to sound maybe as negative as it's going to, but especially us living in the South, and there's this whole culture of being saved and accepting Jesus, and have you accepted Jesus? And I appreciate that sentiment, but it's incomplete. So that's really not the question. It's not the question. Accepting Jesus is step one, admittedly. Yes, that's good. But really the follow through, and I think where the gospel steps in and where it takes it to, is, do you act in His name? Do you emulate and represent Him? Basically, do you have His authority to act as He would act and live as He would live? Like, that's the transformative experience that the gospel can provide, because you are called, and if you choose, you will be chosen. Chosen to do what? Like, what are you chosen for? Well, exactly what it says here. To take up your cross, follow Him, and feed His sheep, meaning act as the Savior would act. Not just in deed, but with real authority, to act in His name as a true covenant child and disciple of Christ. Like, there's so much there that the question and the culture around, have you accepted Jesus? It is so short-sighted. And I think it falls so far short of what Christ truly desires for us, that it's, and I don't know that mainstream Christianity and evangelicals mean for it to come off that way. I don't think that's the intent, but there are so many who just myopically focused on accepting Jesus. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's step one, but there is so much more. And the greatest joy and the greatest blessings come after you not only accept Him, but now you truly take His name upon you and you act as He would act. And He has given you the authority to do so. Like, that's transformation. That's real power to change and to rise above and to elevate beyond the natural man or woman that we would be otherwise.
I appreciate more and more over time the idea of taking up our own cross and following Christ. That idea of self-sacrifice. And the fact that Christ did it willingly. I was pondering on this earlier today, the fact that, Christ offers us mercy and pure love because He loves us. He offers us a fullness of love, this charity, right? And he is the advocate with the Father for us because he performed the atonement. And by doing such, he is able to represent us, right? To plead our case for the Father. But I was just pondering on how profound it is that it's already profound that someone would do that for us out of the kindness of their heart. But it's even more profound that he also put himself down and through everything he went through to then be able to plead our case before the Father. It's just extremely profound that someone would do that for you. Because it's really easy to do something nice when it's easy, but to do something nice when it makes your situation worse, that's not an easy thing to do. Okay, it's not an easy thing to do, even when it affects you a little bit. But what Christ is saying is pick up your cross, like go the distance, like do the hard things, even if it impacts you. Do what is good to serve and bless others. It's such a powerful image. It's such a powerful message, and it's just a metaphor. It's imagery that teaches me. Every time I read it, it's more impactful to me. Like it inspires me to want to really make the law of sacrifice come alive in my life and discover how I could do that more truly, more completely in my life. And it's not just take up your cross, but take up your cross, follow me, and feed my sheep is the instruction we're giving here. It combines those two ideas of taking up the cross with feeding the sheep. So there's service or ministry, right? Giving of your time. There's the spirit of consecration in here. I just found these verses to be very profound and kind of a complete temple experience, so to speak. Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
No, I think that was well said.
Keeping in section 112, continuing on, we get some more message on the message they are to preach and how they are to preach. And it says, wherefore, whithersoever they shall send you, go ye, and I will be with you. And in whatsoever place ye shall proclaim my name, an effectual door shall be opened unto you, that they may receive my word. Whosoever receiveth my word receiveth me, and whosoever receiveth me receiveth those, the first presidency, whom I have sent, whom I have made counselors for my name's sake unto you. So we have this idea of, whether by my own mouth or the mouth of my servants, is the same, right? We have this concept that the Lord places his priesthood and his authorized servants on the earth. And those who receive them receive Christ, or vice versa. Those who truly receive Christ will receive his servants. So the purpose of the word, yes, is to bring people to Christ. But if they truly come unto Christ, they will receive those whom Christ has sent in his stead, those who are his priesthood representatives. And this is the method, this is the New Testament model, right? That Christ called 12 apostles and sent them out to preach, to bring others to Christ, but Christ wasn't sticking around. He had places to be. So who are they going to be following in Christ's absence? The apostles. And, as church grew, those who the apostles would send in their stead, 70s, etc. This priesthood structure. This is the New Testament model. It's how it worked. It's in the New Testament. It's there. I've read it. Okay. Now, skip into verse 23. Verily, verily, I say unto you, darkness covers the earth, and gross darkness the minds of the people. and all flesh has become corrupt before my face. So what is the darkness that covers the earth, and the gross darkness that covers the mind of the people? The darkness that covers the earth is the apostasy. It's the lack of priesthood authority. The gross darkness in the minds of the people is their inability to see the light, is their inability to recognize Christ's servants who are, at this point, now being sent to preach. So when it says all flesh has become corrupt before my face, right, it's because this corruption is a lack of priesthood, or worse, false priesthood that is on the earth, even growing and amassing power in the absence of Christ's priesthood structure.
I appreciate as well how the title slide for this week is "I will order all things for your good," and then speaking of this slide, this darkness that you're referencing, another way of saying that is not recognizing the holy order of God. In fact, we see most people today have completely perverted or inverted that holy order and how God structures his covenant society. And so there really is something to this idea of being able to see, again, kind of going back to the patterns, the model, the methods in which the Lord structures and organizes his kingdom on the earth. And that order has been restored. And there are so many who are unable, or I should say, unwilling, most likely, to recognize it and to receive that. And that's, on the one hand, disheartening, but it's so joyful when somebody does recognize it and fully embrace it, and their life is completely and entirely transformed, and they begin to see the Lord in a new light, and in a way that they could not have done so otherwise. And it is good that, especially after the whole Charlie Kirk situation, so many people are going back to church or giving Christianity a try, and they're going and trying to experience the love of God. And I welcome that. And whatever denomination they're going to, that's a good thing. And that's a positive thing. That's the right momentum that we want to see happening. But I truly hope and I pray that as people can kind of embrace and come closer to understanding the Lord, they can start to see that there really is a more perfect order, a more holy order that's available, and that they too can be a part of that and to have real authority as part of that order.
Continuing on in the spirit of priesthood, for unto you the 12, and those the first presidency, who are appointed with you to be your counselors and leaders, is the power of this priesthood given for the last days and for the last time, in the which is the dispensation of the fullness of times, which power you hold in connection with all those who have received a dispensation at any time from the beginning of creation. For verily I say unto you, the keys of the dispensation which ye have received have come down from the fathers, and last of all, being sent down from heaven unto you. So, priesthood is eternal. Melchizedek priesthood, or the order, the holy order after the Son of God, is eternal. And the lesson we're being taught here is that, yes, the restoration of the church is a restoration of priesthood authority. And it's not just Christ restoring his priesthood, but it's the pattern itself being restored and being perpetuated. And this is the importance of these the ministry of angels being part of this restoration. Because you could argue it would have been much simpler for Jesus to have laid hands on Joseph Smith in the first vision, just say, I give you everything. Get to work. Okay.
That would have been nice.
But what was necessary is a restoration of all the dispensations, so that the work could thematically continue in the pattern and continue in this eternal round and these cycles, this dispensational cycles that happen. And, you know, the symbolism of it is important, is what I'm trying to get at. You know, it's, you could argue the whole laying on of hands and everything. There's great symbolism in that, of these keys being transferred from one person to another, or as it says here, down from the fathers. Right? There's this symbolism, this idea of continuity from God to Adam to each dispensation head, from prophet to prophet, and then them coming forth during the restoration and restoring these keys with very specific ideas and instruction on how the kingdom of God is supposed to operate. It's important in terms of instruction. It's important in terms of symbolism, and more importantly than that, I think it is the established order, how things always happen, that there is always this continuity from past to present, or from one dispensation to the next, even when there's time in between.
Yeah, and when the Lord talks about there in verse 31, where he says, or excuse me, verse 30, where he talks about this power in regards to the dispensation of the fullness of times, think about these men who we've talked about before, how the men that Joseph was seeking out, and ultimately that were many of which were fully converted to the gospel, they were elect men. I mean, they were truly seeking God's kingdom on earth. And all of a sudden they're being told, you have the same power that these great dispensation heads had before you. You know, like, you have that same ability that Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, you know, even Christ, you know, all of these great restorationists that existed. The Lord is telling them, like, you have that as well. I think there's an important lesson the Lord's trying to instill within these men with what they're going to be called to do and what they will go and do and go through over the next several decades to ensure that the gospel continues to roll forth. I mean, he was really trying to use, pretty dramatic language here to show them, like, this, there's real serious stuff here going on, and everything you've read about in the Bible and all of these miraculous stories and great prophets and dispensation heads, you have that exact same authority, you know. And if we internalize that and say, well, technically we have been given that same authority as well, it really kind of helps you live up to the privileges and the abilities and the rights that the Lord has blessed you with. And far too often we live way, way, way below what we could be doing and how we could be exercising the authority that God has given us.
There's also talking about the restoration of priesthood. Like, it says the dispensation of the fullness of times, which another way of talking about that is the dispensation of the restoration of all things. And it's an interesting theme to think about, because the restoration of all things, like, right, that requires a token of all past dispensations. What it's saying is that all dispensations will be restored in this one, which, you know, is, you could say, literally fulfilled in that ministry of angels that came and gave their keys. But I think, I find that as you study the restoration, you actually see elements of past dispensations play themselves out again. This is something I've talked about before, but I look through the history of the restoration and everything they went through, that, you know, the saints went through, and all these very sacred experiences we have. You know, go and read saints and everything we have in there. I think you can go through the history of the Restoration and find elements of past dispensations that have been played out anew in this dispensation. And I don't think that is coincidence. I think that this is a special dispensation, this dispensation of the fullness of times, wherewith we're getting a revival, a renewal. We're getting an express version of the entire plan played out again in a short period of time. And I think when you think of it in those terms, you can look back to some of the church history. You can look back at some things that maybe that confuse you about why did this happen the way it happened, and you can start placing those elements in this light, in this model, and realize there were things that were being restored in the name of the restoration of all things. There were things that needed to happen in order for past things to be restored so that we could then move on and build on top of it. And when you look at history as progressive like that, and you look at this dispensation specifically as needing to reestablish things that were lost in order to then progress and build on top of it and move forward with what God has for us in this, unique to our dispensation, I think it puts a lot of things in perspective and a lot of things in place throughout church history that might otherwise be confusing or unclear as to why they happened.
Yeah, this is, we get like the Cliff Notes version of all of the dispensations in this last one. And I kind of dig that. I always preferred that in school anyway. So the fact that we're kind of getting small pieces of all of it all at once, and then we get to add to it as part of the fullness of this last dispensation is even better. And to your point, there's a lot of things that, this is what I always caution young people. There's a lot of things and inconsistencies or perceived, let me say that, perceived inconsistencies or things that don't make sense, or, why did these certain events occur or these certain things happen early on in the church? And I'm not one to sit here and say, hey, there's a perfect answer in response to everything that has happened in church history. But the interesting thing is, for those who are true seekers, as time goes by, there is so much evidence and just data and facts that continue to be unearthed and revealed that truly support so much of what people at one time had significant problems with early church history and some of the things that were done and things that were said and so on and so forth, and so kind of the apologetic side of the gospel, it just continues to actually look better and better for why certain things were done and why certain things had to happen the way that they had to happen. And it's not the inverse. That's the interesting thing is if the church were not true, as time would be going by, you would think that there would be more of a dismantling. You would think that there would be truly an apostasy within the church. And we don't see that, actually. We see that as time goes by, more of the gaps, more of the uncertainties, more of the things that we couldn't quite explain, they start to get filled. And this full compilation of a foundation and understanding is starting to grow, and it's actually starting to support so much of what has been done throughout church history more and more. And that's not enough to convert anybody, but for those who already have that faith and that testimony, it is, it's nice to see that the faith is being rewarded, because, you and I will talk all the time about how things continue to get discovered that support so many of the revelations of Joseph Smith, and the whole book of Abraham, and the fact that he was criticized for decades and decades for that book. And now as time goes by, little by little, there's more and more support, and evidence to really strengthen what was there, and so it's just interesting how you don't see this apostasy, you don't see this crumbling of the foundations of the church, you actually see quite the opposite, where it continues to be strengthened and supported as time persists.
Dude, Egyptology is such a scam. This is completely off topic, but you mentioned Book of Abraham.
That was not on my bingo card tonight, but I'm glad you mentioned it.
It's such a scam where they present themselves as like experts, these Egyptologists, and they don't know nothing. Like every few number, like every X number of years, like they have to like replace all of their textbooks because everything they knew about Egyptology has changed. And they like
so funny that you went there.
It was one of the pyramids where they translated like all the hieroglyphics like on the inside of the pyramid, like going from outside into the middle. And
yeah,
they had his translation, and then like at some point they realized they were translating it backwards, that it was meant to be read when the Pharaoh resurrected and was coming out, it's coming forth. So like they had this whole like translation that was just like translated backwards, and they thought they were right. And it's just like, sorry.
No, that's a rabbit hole we can't go down right now because I have no thoughts as well. But
we can and we must. What is this podcast for if not the rabbit holes?
The rabbit holes and the wanderings. You're right. You're right.
Okay, speaking of rabbit holes, here's a few we can go down on the next slide if we want to. Final thought on priesthood here. I'm jumping ahead and pulling from section 114, which I think only has 2 verses. But for thus saith the Lord, inasmuch as there are those among you who deny my name, others shall be planted in their stead and receive their bishopric. Amen. Is a principle that we're all expendable. That we can be given offices, we can be given priesthood, and if we deny the Lord, if we fall away, the Lord will put someone else in that office, in that position, and the work will continue with or without us. And that's an important principle to something that is eternal. That is a very important element of an eternal order, is that it has to be able to continue and have continuity regardless of the individuals participating in the offices at any given time. And we're at a unique point where we're in a transition right now of the office of president of the church changing from one person to another. And it's a beautiful priesthood principle that shows the continuity of Christ through his order. And I'll let you speak, but it brings a lot of interesting questions to my mind.
Well, it's who was it? Brigham Young who talked about who was the prophet? This might have been mentioned recently, even in conference, where they talked about if Joseph had not done it, the Lord would have found somebody else. And the Lord even warned Joseph at one point, saying, "Look, you either do this, I command you to basically do this, or I'll go find somebody else." And so for us, that should maybe make us feel a little bit better. Like if Joseph was expendable, okay, it's not such a bad thing that we're also expendable. Like if we choose not to fulfill and magnify our roles and responsibilities, our priestly duties, there's somebody else that can step in and do it. If Joseph was capable of being replaced, we are most certainly capable of being replaced. The beautiful thing is all of that is true, and yet the Lord still yearns for you to choose to be part. Like that's a more beautiful thing. It's like, yeah, I could get anybody to do this, but I want you. Like I'm giving you the opportunity. I want you to do it. I want you to choose to do it. Like there's something very powerful in that perspective and how the Lord has set it up where, somebody else will do it, but here's your opportunity. Like I want you to take advantage of it and make the most of it. And it's such a it really is such a confidence boosting, just an understanding of how worthwhile the Lord thinks you are, and how he really seeks to elevate you and truly lift you up to higher spheres and to learn his ways in all ways. You know, he wants to do all of that. And so it really is a beautiful plan that he has designed for each of his children. And it provides, the beautiful thing is, it provides salvation, the potential for salvation for all of his children, that none need be lost if they but choose him.
Yeah. I'm gonna walk this line here. I'll do the best I can, not be controversial. But I think this is an eternal principle. Like this is a universal principle. This applies to everyone, to every office. Okay? The Holy Order will work regardless of if an individual servant magnifies his office or not. Okay, this is important, and this is a little hard to comprehend in the way that we teach the plan of salvation currently. It's in the church, we teach a very watered down version of the plan of salvation. We completely remove the eternal round element altogether. We present the plan of salvation as a start to finish kind of thing. But we lose a lot of depth in doing that, because, for example, we look your example of Joseph Smith. Well, we say, oh, he was foreordained to do this, as if it had he failure was not an option. But that can't be the case. Failure has to be an option, or there's not agency. Okay, and I think this is a difficult thing to teach and to talk about, because we have this like foreordination idea cemented in our head with how we generally talk about like premortal life and whatnot. But I mean, Alma talks about everyone who receives the priesthood was foreordained to receive it. Well, if the gospel is preached to everyone and everyone has the opportunity to enter in, that means everyone's foreordained. Right? The fact that we're here on the earth already means we're foreordained. We're given the opportunity and we can enter into it. And I just think this is important because the missions that these men accomplished, like the work that Joseph Smith accomplished, the mission he accomplished, it is all the more significant knowing that he did it of his free will and choice, and that the option of failure was on the table. That he could, at any moment, have said, this is too much. I ain't doing it. Lord, find somebody else. Like, that could have happened at any moment. Like, with what he was going through, it could have happened. Like, we need to appreciate the fact that it could have happened, and yet that man completed his mission, and he did what was asked of him. Like, that makes it more significant. It makes it more meaningful. It makes it more sacred. And the natural extension of this, and this is where it gets a little dicey, a little shaky. But like, to me, like, the extension of this thought process is Jesus himself. Could Jesus have failed his mission? Could he have not drank of the bitter cup? The easy answer, the milk doctrine you get at church is like, no, he had to do it. He was always going to do it. And okay, I like that. Okay. But to me, the atonement is much more meaningful if you put failure as an option. That Christ, like when you put him in the Garden of Gethsemane, and to that very point, that moment, he still had the option and temptation of walking away and saying, this is too much for me. Like, when you accept that that was a reality that could have happened, it makes his atonement much more powerful and much more meaningful that he continued
Your
with
love
it.
for him grows exponentially when you realize there was still agency and a choice, and a real choice. Like, he was not forced nor compelled. There were not angels tying him down and saying, you must do this or you will do this. And that is a little bit of a foreign concept because we don't talk like that. And with that perspective,
actually, an angel did come down in Gethsemane, I think,
it did to support him and help him out.
He got a nudge.
He did a little bit of that, but that even furthers your point, though, that there was definitely agency there.
It was real.
Because there was agency there. He needed that extra support. He needed that extra assistance and comfort and strength. And you're right. That actually does strengthen the love and the appreciation and the affection that you have for the Savior. And just to take that a step further, you see shades of this as well in the creation narrative and kind of the pre-existent, pre-mortal life between Lucifer and Jehovah. It could have just as easily been, because Isaiah tells us how Lucifer was a noble and great one. He could have potentially fulfilled the role of Savior. He could have stepped up and said, I will do it, and I will do it the way you seek for it to be done, Father. And he could have been the one. But what happened? He didn't choose that path. He didn't choose that way. And so what did the Father do? Well, he had others prepared and ready in their stead. So Lucifer was expendable, meaning if he doesn't fulfill it, there are others who are willing to do it, right? And so we see that at all levels, where there's this consistent agency and choice, and you get to determine your own fate. You get to determine the course of your eternal path. And that's very scary on the one hand, but on the other, it is incredible that is the plan and that is the path for us. And it makes you, exactly as you said, it just makes you love and appreciate the Savior even more for what he did.
Now, if he had backed out in Gethsemane, I'm not sure what the Father would have done at that point.
Good question. Global reset.
Who would have taken up that bishopric at that point? That's something I'll have to put more thought into. That's too much for right now. I haven't.
Quick, send the flood. Let's start over again.
Good news is it did not happen. That did not happen. Okay. Okay, let's get into Isaiah. Isn't that
one's favorite?
It's becoming my favorite. All right. The nerdier you get, the more you like Isaiah. I think that's how it goes. Okay, so section, what is it, 113? Is just a little Q&A session where we get some prophetic interpretation on a few verses of Isaiah. There's some members that had some questions, and Joseph Smith gave them some interpretations. It's pretty legit. And this is an Isaiah section that chapters that do appear in the Book of Mormon as well. So you can already understand that you're going to get some interpretations relevant to the restoration in these sections here. But we start with Isaiah 11, which is, and there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. I found kind of an alternate translation of that, which would say, there shall come forth a branch from the trunk of Jesse. Indeed, a shoot from his roots shall bear fruit, which I think makes the imagery a little more clear. And I've got, for those watching on YouTube here, I've got an image of that, but you've got a tree trunk, and then you've got, the tree's been cut down. So, you would think that tree is dead, but the roots are still alive. So out of one of those roots, a branch has sprung up and is sprouting leaves. So the tree's kind of regrowing out of one of its roots after having been cut down. And this is the imagery we get in Isaiah. There shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. And we get an interpretation on what do these symbols mean, the stem, the root, and the rod. And surprisingly, even though we have direct answers to what these mean, this is actually a section that there's a bit of debate around as to how these interpretations should be themselves interpreted. But let's read through them here. So it says the stem is Christ. So that's pretty clear. The trunk of the tree is Christ. And it says the root is a descendant of Jesse, as well as of Joseph, unto whom rightly belongs the priesthood and the keys of the kingdom for an ensign and for the gathering of my people in the last days. And the rod is a servant in the hands of Christ, who is partly a descendant of Jesse as well as of Ephraim, or of the house of Joseph, on whom there is laid much power. And the debate is kind of, well, who are these two servants? Or who are these two people, this root and rod, that are to come forth? And one consensus is that, well, Joseph Smith was one of them, and then the other is some Davidic servant, or someone who fills this descendant of Jesse and Joseph that is still to come forth, right, in preparation. It's a great prophet, a great servant who is to come forth in the last days, at some point during the second coming, timeline. But which, is an interesting interpretation, something to think about. But when I was reading this, you know me, I tend towards the plain and precious. And I read this several times. I put thought into this, and it just became very clear to me, my opinion, that this is really just talking about Joseph Smith. It's just talking about the restoration of the church. And what it's saying is, so the stem is Christ, and it's saying the root is a descendant of Judah and Joseph, who unto whom rightly belongs the priesthood and the keys of the kingdom. So we have roots coming from the trunk. So this is my controversial take. The roots of the trunk which is Christ, would be Christ's posterity. His line, his posterity that continues on the earth. Now, you don't have to accept that. You can just say it's some line, it's some lineage that stems from Jesse and Joseph. Okay. I've actually got, I've got this sick book here, like a textbook. It's called Dynasty of the Holy Grail, Mormonism's Sacred Bloodline. Okay.
This was also not on my bingo card tonight.
What this book does is it explores lore and oral tradition of Christianity, and it says if the Holy Grail, Da Vinci Code type idea of a sacred bloodline were to be true, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the true restored church, if those two things are true, then it would make sense that Joseph Smith was a bloodline descendant of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Okay. Obviously, that's all speculative, but
that's our not doctrine podcast.
But he put in the work, okay? He put in the work to say, if this is true, here's how it might be true. Okay. Mm-hmm. Regardless if it's actually Christ's posterity or just someone of those tribes, right, of those lineages, what it's saying is the root is simply a lineage. It is a descendancy of those lineages. And then the rod is a servant who will come forth from that lineage, from that line of posterity. So my interpretation, what I'm getting out of this, you had Christ, he established his church, that was the tree, his priesthood, organization, the holy order. That tree gets cut down, there's great apostasy, now we have a trunk. It looks like it's dead, but it's not. There is still hidden roots of priesthood in and among the earth, even though it's not institutionalized. And at some point, that root activates, calls forth a servant of their own line, and the restoration commences from that effort. And I believe that's exactly what we see here in Isaiah. We have the root being a descendant and the rod being a servant who is a descendant. So that's the imagery that I see. And to back up that, there's the other verses in the chapter that just says that the work that is to be done by the root and the rod is to stand as an ensign for the people, restoration of temple, and that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, gathering of Israel. This is all the stuff that is happening now, that we're seeing played out. So my message is, you don't have to overthink it. The plain and precious truth is that there is a method to the madness, and how the priesthood survived post-apostasy, and how it was reorganized, and how the ministry of angels managed that process in the interim, that there is order and method to how the Lord did that, and there were lineages carefully observed and tracked, and that the way that the restoration happened and through whom it happened was actually more purposeful and thought out than perhaps we even realize.
I really like this slide and some of the context that you had around it. It actually reminds me a lot of Elder Palmer. He gave a talk. He was the Australian guy. He gave a talk in afternoon session, Saturday afternoon session, last general conference. And his was the talk about the willow tree that blew over, and he was just going to cut it up because he thought it was dead, and then his neighbor begged him to cut it down, give it a chance. If the roots are still good, if even one root is still good, it might come back. It might sprout again and grow. And sure enough, of course, that's what happened, right? He kind of replants the tree, and then it over time blossoms into this, once again, beautiful willow tree. And that's kind of exactly what's being highlighted here, is that, yeah, this will take place, and Isaiah's foreshadowing this great apostasy, and then clearly showing that the remnants are still there, though. There's still a lot of good, fertile soil, and the roots are still there, and this restoration will happen, and you will start to see once again this great, this great rolling forth of the holy order of God once again going about the earth.
Dude, and I like the idea that the angels, John, these terrestrial and celestial beings that are resurrected, that are translated, I like the idea that they're just kind of hanging out on the earth, like watching.
They actually never left.
Yeah, they're just like
they're just observing and reporting.
They just keep their mouths shut. They're living their lives in the fullness of their priesthood, and they're just like waiting for the moment, and they're like, we're going to do this.
Can you imagine if that's true, and they're sitting there in like Palmyra, and they're looking at Joseph, just looking up at the Lord, like, this is the kid, like, this is the dude that's gonna bring about all of this. Like, kind of with a half questioning look, like,
that's a good root.
Really gonna happen?
That's a good root right there. Okay, well, what all do you have on your bingo card so far?
We have checked boxes that I could never have predicted tonight. I don't know how many more of those we're going to be able to squeeze in.
Yeah, on our we do these come follow me's, and we try to keep the crazy out of it as much as possible. But the time is coming where we can't hold it in anymore. We're gonna have to start doing. We're gonna have to start.
Gloves are gonna come.
We're gonna have to start putting some of our craziness out there that we've got. Just it's just building up in me, and it just I can't hold it in anymore. I mean, how could you keep the knowledge of Mormonism's sacred bloodline? How can you keep that to yourself? It's just too hard.
Not possible. Not possible.
Okay. Last but not least, we have a couple more Isaiah interpretations from chapter 52, which are just beautiful verses. What is meant by Isaiah 52? Put on thy strength, O Zion. And this is actually the verse that says, awake, awake, put on thy strength, O Zion, put on thy beautiful garments, O Jerusalem, the holy city. I think Elder Bednar gave a whole talk on this. If I'm not mistaken, it's from this verse a little while back. But Joseph Smith said he had reference to those whom God should call in the last days, who should hold the power of priesthood to bring again Zion and the redemption of Israel, and to put on her strength is to put on the authority of the priesthood, which she, Zion, has a right to by lineage, also to return to that power which she had lost. And then the next question is, what to understand by Zion loosing herself from the bands of her neck? We are to understand that the scattered remnants are exhorted to return to the Lord from whence they have fallen, which if they do, the promise of the Lord is that he will speak to them or give them revelation. The bands of her neck are the curses of God upon her, or the remnants of Israel in their scattered condition among the Gentiles. I think another way of saying that is the influences of Babylon, or the fact that they are scattered and have their heart in Babylon. So that's the bands of their neck, and they're being called to return to Zion, to flee Babylon unto Zion. And how do you do that? Well, yes, there at times are an aspect of literal gathering, but how that really happens is through the power of the priesthood. We put on the strength and we put on the beautiful garments symbolically as we make covenants with the Lord and then grow in righteousness and be true and faithful to those covenants that we make. And this is all, this is the purpose of the priesthood. This is the purpose of the temple. And yes, to some degrees, and in some senses, this is all symbolic, but it represents something that's a transformation that is very real in the individual. And this is a theme that you and I talk about quite a bit. As we become Zion individuals, only by individuals becoming Zion individuals can Zion be built. It's not built from the top down. It's built from the bottom up. Zion can only be built as individuals arrive at this state where they need to be at, where they are able to righteously hold the power of the priesthood and put on this authority of the priesthood. Did you fall asleep on me?
No, I was actually in deep thought and pondering, and I wasn't sure your turn. Forgive me. But just following up on what you were saying, especially around verse 7, and obviously verse 8 or 9, and kind of that call back to come back, to pull away from Babylon and to come back to Zion is beautiful. But man, that verse 7, the more we study Isaiah, you just see more and more of the temple imagery and, the covenant path and that true discipleship. And it is such a blessing and something that I know you and I talk about all the time, but has a tendency to get lost in the administration of the church. Although the brother and the sisters who speak at conference try to point us back to this all the time, everything that we do in the church points us to the temple. Like everything we do, everything we're working on, everything we're improving on, everything we're trying to build up in other people is pointing us to the temple. Why? Because that is where Christ reveals himself. Like that is where you come to know him the most. And I just love the imagery that Isaiah uses here and the interpretations that Joseph receives, because you see how everything that the early saints were building towards was going to be the culmination of these kind of Isaiah prophecies and the power that was going to be received by the saints in the temple. And, you know, that I know I can speak for you and I, but just about anybody, like when you truly make the temple the focus and the center of your worship, it changes you. It changes you in a way that is beyond description. And it truly does empower you in ways that can't fully be explained to people who haven't experienced that transformative power, you know. And that's really, I think, at the heart of this and what Isaiah is talking about here, because you truly become not only closer to the Savior, but you get to know him so much more individually and perfectly, and you feel him next to you in ways that you cannot do otherwise. And so I love the temple symbolism here all throughout Isaiah, of course, but especially these questions, and then obviously the answers that Joseph received, because this is all around that time in Kirtland where there was a lot of preparation for this. Even though the full endowment wasn't being received, this was all in preparation for what the Lord knew would be coming and over the next few years, you know, with Nauvoo eventually, and the temple that would be there. And then obviously the saints going out to Salt Lake with the full endowment being presented. So just my witness to those that may be listening to this: make the temple your priority. Worship in the temple as often as possible, and allow yourself to feel and experience that closeness with the Lord in his holy house.
I too can testify the moment many years ago at this point, the moment my wife and I started attending the temple weekly, and we are blessed to live, 30, 40 minutes from a temple, but we can get to it easily, so that's feasible. The moment we made the decision, we're going to go weekly. That's going to be our date night. And, it took planning. It cost money for babysitter. It's not necessarily easy. But the moment we committed to that is the moment we started seeing miracles in our life. And those miracles happen in many different ways, but most importantly, in ourselves, in our hearts, and in our relationship with the Lord, and in the vision that we were given on how we can approach him and truly commune with him. The way that I often express the priesthood is that we send missionaries out into the world to bring them into the church. Well, once you're in the church points you to the temple. Well, once you go to the temple points you to the home. The purpose of the temple is to teach you how to truly make your home a temple. Or in other words, to truly make it a mansion of the Lord, of the Father. Your castle where you can rule and reign in righteousness, in the authority of the priesthood, and build your little kingdom on God's earth, and truly participate and be an active participant in God's plan. And that's the plan of salvation that I see. And that's how I view it. And that's what has brought me power in the priesthood, is to recognize that when done in the proper way, the home is a representation of the eternities, of the celestial. And that's not something you have to wait for. You have to die to get there. No, the blessings of the celestial kingdom, they start now. They start in life. all it takes is for you to see it, understand it, and then implement it. And the fullness of those blessings, they roll forth and they flow from you freely. And it's simply the greatest thing that you could have in your life is to start seeing the gospel and the plan of salvation in a way that's very real and applicable, and it's life-changing. And my testimony is that that's not unique to me, it's not unique to you, that this is the plan that God has for each and every one of us, that we can go to the temple and then return home. And it doesn't, whether you're single or married, this principle is true. You take your covenants and you take that righteousness and you take that priesthood power back home with you. You make your home a temple, and the power and the Spirit of the Lord that you will obtain and that you will have with you, it's simply life-changing and it's world-changing. Because as we each do this individually, right, Zion is established and the will of the Lord is done. And this priesthood order that we've talked about several times in this episode, it is fulfilled and it comes to pass. And that is the way of the Lord. And that is my testimony in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.